Hello again. As you know, I'm Eli, the computer guy over here for everymanit.com. Today's class is basic Linux tasks. So we've talked about where Linux came from in the introductory class. In the installation class, we showed you how to install Linux. And now we are going to go over the basic tasks that you can perform in Linux. We're going to show you how to install applications, how to update applications, how to look at basically something called a task manager and kill processes if necessary, how to start services, and a few other things. So these are the basic tasks that you will need to understand in order to do anything else in Linux. So this is the basic stuff right here. Everything that I'm going to be showing you today will be on Ubuntu Linux server. So this is not the desktop version, this is a server version. You're going to be looking at the LUI, the line user interface. We will be typing in commands. So there's no right clicks, there's no left clicks, there's no fancy graphics. You're looking at a black screen with a whole bunch of letters on it, you know, the old DOS prompt. But remember, this may seem a little daunting, but understand, as I said before in the other classes, in the Linux world, all types of serious administration in Linux has to be done at the command line, at that LUI, that line user interface. Even if you are using the desktop version of Ubuntu Linux, it does not give you the full power of the operating system. So a lot of times, even if you're using the desktop version, you still have to open up a terminal screen and go in and type out all the commands that you need to type out to administer the system. So with that, give me a second. We're going to dive into this. Like I say, today's class is all the basic commands that you're going to have to understand in order to start administering a Linux system. So the first command that we need to talk about before we start doing any of these other commands is the command called sudo. S-U-D-O. This means super user do. In the previous classes, I talked about how different distributions of Linux do things slightly differently, and that every single distribution of Linux has its own quirks, its own little ways of doing things, depending on what the creators were worried about. Well, one of the things that the creators of Ubuntu were worried about was security. As we talked about before, in all Linux computers, there is a user called root. Root is the highest level user on the computer, kind of like the administrator in a Windows computer. Well, just like on a Windows computer, if somebody logs in as the administrator or if somebody logs in as root on a Linux computer, they can do absolutely anything they want to that computer. So that they can install viruses, they can put in malware, they can just cause a lot of havoc. Basically, hackers using special programs and scripts can also try to log in as root and, cause all these problems. So what Ubuntu did way back in the day is they decided we never want anybody to be able to log in straight as root. So in Ubuntu Linux, you cannot log in as the user root. In other distributions of Linux, you can log in as root. In Ubuntu, you are not allowed to log in as root. Well, here comes a problem. Since you can't log in as root, well, how do you do all these administrative tasks? How do you run administrative processes? Well, what they have is this program called sudo. So what this means is super user, which essentially means root, do. So it's, in Windows, how with Windows Vista and with Windows 7, you can right click and you can do run as administrator. Basically, the sudo command is run as administrator. So if you're going to go and install a program, like we'll talk about in a minute, the command for installing a program is called apt-get. Well, if you on apt-get, nothing will happen because you don't have permission as your user account to do apt-get. So what you would do is you would say sudo apt-get, etc. So basically, the main thing that you have to understand with the sudo command, this is super user do, is that in Ubuntu Linux, this distribution, you are never, ever, ever allowed to log in as root. But root is the only one that's allowed to run a lot of these different processes or services. So what you do is you run the command sudo and then put whatever arguments are behind that. So that's what sudo is. It allows you basically to run commands as administrator if you're thinking about it from the Windows world. Now the next thing we need to talk about are man pages. So M-A-N. Man pages stand for manual pages. So what you have to remember with man pages is that I think these actually came back from Unix that was created back in the 60s. And you know, Linux was created in 1994. So this was long before the internet. So, you know, as we talked about before, if you do not understand how a command is supposed to work or what command you're supposed to run, you're kind of stuck in Linux, at least with the server version, because you just got this little blinking cursor. So if you don't understand the command or the arguments, well, you don't know what to put in. So what they did is they came up with something called man pages. With man pages, what you do is you type in man and then the command that you want to figure out. Let's say, so man ping. If you know anything about computers, you should know the ping command. What this will do in Linux is it will open up a page that will describe to you the ping command and everything that you should know about the ping command. So it's pretty cool. So if you're trying to figure something out, basically all you do is you type in man space and whatever the command is, and that will open up a manual page for you, and you'll be able to read about whatever it is. You know, if you ping or apt-get, as we talked about, that kind of stuff, you can just plug that in, and like I say, it'll give you the arguments. And some of these are almost a book. I mean, maybe 20 pages on all of the thoughts and processes that went behind whatever command you're trying to run. So that's what man pages are. Nowadays, you know, in the age of the internet, personally, I find a Google search is a whole hell of a lot easier than trying to do with a man page. But you can do with a man page. Basically, this is like the old question mark command in the Windows world. Now, here's going to be the sucky part is, again, Linux doesn't explain a lot of things to you. It doesn't make things necessarily very easy. So when you go and you type in the man command and then you go into ping, you're going to get this whole page of text, and it's going to tell you about the ping command. Well, then you're not going to know how the hell to get out of that page. They don't make it very, very easy. You're going to hit escape, and that's not going to do anything. You're going to hit other keys. That's not going to do anything. In order to exit the man pages, you need to type in the letter Q for quit. When you type in the letter Q for quit, you will drop out of the man page. So this is one thing, oh my golly, like I say, for me, I mean, it's just driven me up the wall, you know, when I've tried to learn Linux, is all these stupid little commands. So you open up the man page, you figure out everything you need to know, and then you don't know how the hell to get back out of the man page. Well, the way you get back out of the man page is you type in the letter Q. You type in the letter Q, that quits the man page, and you are back to the command prompt. So let's go over to the computer right now, and I'll just show you how these man pages work really quick. So here we are at the login screen for the Ubuntu server. So we'll just log in, you know, ELI, password 123456. And so we are now logged in to this Ubuntu server. You know, we've got this nice little cursor, you know, just blinking at us. And as I said before, this is all you get. So if you don't know what to do with this cursor, you're kind of screwed right at the moment. But right now I'm going to show you how to use the man page command, or the man command. So, like I said, all you do is you type in the command man. So it's M-A-N, and then space, and then whatever command you are interested about learning. So I was talking about ping before, so we'll do P-I-N-G, and then you just hit the enter key. And now look at this. This gives you everything you could possibly want to know about the ping command. Ping uses the ICMP protocol's mandatory echo request datagram to elicit an ICMP echo response. What are the options? Audible pings, set to debug, all this kind of stuff. So this is talking about everything you could possibly need to know about the ping command. Now, like I said, if you want to drop out, because you're looking at this, and you know this isn't the Windows world where you have like a little X that you can click and it closes out. If you hit escape, nothing's going to happen here. If you hit Control C, which is supposed to normally get you out of things like this, that's not going to help. The only thing that'll help is if you hit the letter Q. And I don't know if you could hear that I only hit one letter, but it's not Q enter, it's not Shift Q, it's not anything, it is just Q. As soon as you hit Q, you will come back and you will now be back at the command prompt. So we could look at other commands. So we could say man apt get, as I was talking about. And now this will tell you everything you need to know, and probably a whole hell of a lot more, about the apt get command. And like I say, I mean, this is some of these commands, it is absolute books that it's talking about. So so here's all the stuff about the apt get command. So as I said, the man command is exceedingly easy. All this is the manual page. The manual page is, of course, what describes, it describes the command that you're trying to run. All you do, you type in to use the man command is MAN space, whatever command it is that you're interested in using. Let's say man, the man page for man. And then in order to get out, like I say, because I mean, you're looking, this is the screen you're going to get, and you're going to hit escape, and you're going to hit Control C, and you're going to hit a whole bunch of stuff, and you're still going to be stuck here, and you're going to want to throw your computer out the window. But before you throw the computer out the window, all you have to do to get out of the man pages is hit Q. Q is the answer. You hit Q, and you're back at the command line, and you can run another command. So that's the man pages. Let's go back out to the real world and talk about the next command. So those are the man pages. Pretty simple. Like I say, as long as you remember Q. As long as you remember Q, man pages are wonderful things. If you forget about Q, you just want to throw the computer out the window. But those are man pages. And like I say, they can be very useful, especially if you just need a quick little bit of information, or if you don't have an internet connection, it'll really help. The next command we need to talk about is task cell. Task cell. This stands for task select. This is part of the Ubuntu distribution. I can't tell you if it is part of any other distribution, but I know it is part of Ubuntu's distribution. Now, Ubuntu, like I say, is trying to become the premier provider of Linux distributions. They've really done a lot of work. They're just very good, as user-friendly as Linux ever is, etc. So one of the things they came up with was this program called Task Cell or Task Select. The idea was when you're trying to set up an Apache web server, or you're trying to set up an email server, or you're trying to set up a virtual server, you see each one of these types of servers requires a number of different programs in order for it to work. So if you're trying to set up a web server, you need to install Apache, and you need to install MySQL, and you need to install PHP, and you need to install the connectors so that they can actually work together. Well, what Ubuntu said is, hey, if you need to install all of those things, we can create a script that will just install all of these things for you. So what will happen is, if you know exactly what your server you want your server to do, and you're not really worried about making it really customized, they came up with, I don't know, somewhere between 10 to 20 different packages. And what happens is, if you run the task cell command, you'll get a little, looks like a DOS screen, and it will tell you different server types, and it will have a checkbox by those server types. So if you say, I want to create an email server, and one of the checkboxes says email, all you do is you highlight and check the checkbox, you hit enter, and then Ubuntu will install all the software you need for that email server. Or if you need a file server, or if you need a couple of things. So there's 20 different checkboxes. Let's say you want it to be let's see, Samba, that's called Samba. Let's say you want 3 out of the 20. So you would say, I want an email server, I want a file server, and I want a Samba server. And then you hit enter, it will automatically install all of those different processes or different programs for you, lickety-split, very quick. It's very quick, it's very easy, and this is great, in lab environments or internal in companies. If you just need to throw up a file server really quick, you install Ubuntu in 15 minutes, you run Task Cell, You say file server and you're good to go. You know, an Apache web server, a full-blown web server, you can have up and running in 30 minutes or less, as long as your hardware is worth the damn. So that's what the task cell command does. Let's go over to the computer and I'll just show you how this works. This really is a phenomenal thing. So now we're sitting back at the terminal prompt on the server. So now we're going to do the task cell command, T-A-S-K-S-E-L. Now the main thing that you have to remember with this command and the rest of the commands that I'm going to be showing you today is that you have to put sudo in front of the command. Because when we did the man page command, you know, manual pages are not really security risk. You know, people are not worried about somebody discovering man pages. They are worried about people installing software that should not be installed onto the server. So if you're trying to install software or do any of these other administrative tasks, you have to put the command sudo before whatever command that you're trying to initiate. So sudo, so super user do, and then space, and then task cell, T-A-S-K-S-E-L. So this is sudo super user do task select. Then all you do is you hit the enter key. It asks for the password. And now you're in the task cell little screen. Now with this, these are all the different packages that you can install very easily onto the server. So if you want to be a cloud computing environment, you can select one of these cloud computing things. If you want it to be a DNS server, you can just check off the little box right beside the DNS server and this will become a DNS server. If you want this to be a LAMP server, so this is basically a web server, a Linux, Apache, MySQL, PHP server. If you want it to be an email server, if you want it to be a print server, a Samba file server, a JavaCat server, like I said, there's about 20 different things you can select. Now all you have to do is right beside, you know, whatever kind of server you want to create, let's say like a LAMP server, you just hit the space bar that checks off that little package, and then you can hit enter. So when you hit enter, what will happen is now the server will install all of the software packages that are required for whatever you've selected. So with this LAMP server, now if you're trying to create a LAMP server manually, you have to install Apache, then you have to install MySQL, then you have to install PHP, then you have to install the connectors between PHP and MySQL and Apache. And it's a few steps. It's about 10 different things you have to install. Whereas with this, once we hit OK, it will automatically install all of those things. You know, it'll take a couple of minutes. It'll ask you a few questions, but once the process is done, then you will have a fully functional LAMP server. So here, you can just hit OK. And then now, like I say, it's now installing all of those packages. You can just take my word for it. At the end of it, everything will be installed. So let's go back out to the real world, and we'll talk about the apt-get command, and that's how you install individual software packages. So see, the task cell command, it's dirt simple. Now we're going to talk about how you can install other individual programs. The thing that you have to remember with Linux is, remember, this is an open source world and most of this stuff is free. Or you pay for it in weird ways, like I say, like service agreements or such. The nice part about this is in the Windows world, everything has to go through activation procedures. So whether you're using QuickBooks, whether you're using Adobe, or of course whether you're using Microsoft, everybody's worried that somebody's going to pirate or steal the product, and they put in these insane activation procedures so that you have to have the CD that you got, you have to have the right code, and then beyond that, once it's installed with the right code, you then have to go off and hit some activation servers. Well, in Linux, most of this stuff, remember, as I said before, open source does not equal free. But a lot of open source software is free. So what Linux is able to do is they are able to create things called repositories. Repositories are places on the internet that just house thousands upon thousands upon thousands of Linux programs. So instead of having to have a CD or a disk of some sort, you can just go to that repository and install the application from there. So like I say, in the Windows world or the Mac world, you have to have a CD. You know, you lose a CD, you're screwed. In the Linux world, all the software, or a huge portion of the software, is out sitting in these repositories, and you can just go grab them as long long as you have an internet connection. This is the easiest way to install software on the Linux platform. There are other ways to install Linux or applications in Linux, and we will talk about them in later classes. But again, remember, this is a simple class. This is I'm just trying to walk you into the Linux world. So going out to those repositories right now is the simplest and easiest way to do this. So basically, within your Linux computer, there's already a configuration file that tells that Linux computer where the repositories are. So it says, you know, ubuntu.com server 5, ubuntu.com server 6, etc. When you run what is called the apt-get command, this apt-get command will go out to the repository and it will get whatever program it is that you want to get, and it will hopefully install it for you. So with the apt-get command, the basic command is you put in sudo, so super user do, because you're installing a piece of software onto your computer. So that is something that a root user would do. Then you say apt-get, so apt-get, and then after that you do the command install. So it's saying super user, go get this application and install it. And then after that you put in whatever application it is. So right now we'll just say Apache 2. So if you just wanted a web server without MySQL, without PHP, without any of that, what you could do is you could just run this command, sudo apt-get install Apache 2. That would go out to the repository sitting on the internet, it would find Apache 2, and it would install Apache 2. And it is that easy. Now you have a web server. It's not going to do a whole hell of a lot, but you have at least a web server. Now you say you download Apache 2 and you decide, I don't really like Apache 2. I want to use a different web server. Well, the command to uninstall Apache 2 is simply sudo super user do apt-get remove Apache 2. So sudo apt-get install Apache 2 installs Apache 2. Sudo apt-get remove uninstalls Apache 2. So it'll go in and it will uninstall Apache 2. It is that simple. This is how you install most of the software that you're going to need for your Linux server. Again, like I said, once you get better, more experienced in the Linux world, you will start buying proprietary software in the Linux world. So you'll buy special backup software and special whatever software. And some of that stuff may not be in these repositories, and you will have to go through different steps in order to install those programs. But for 99% of the programs that anybody ever installs off of, for Linux, this apt-get command will work. And so that's why right now, we're just staying here with it. We're not going to go off into compiling and all that kind of garbage. So if you want to install a piece of software, and if you're trying to figure out, you're like, how do I find out what piece of software that I want to install? Basically, you just do a Google search. So if you decide I want to install an email server, you go out and you research on Google, and it'll say, hey, this is the email server that you should use. And so you'll go sudo apt-get install whatever the name of that server is. So there's not really, like I say, there's thousands and thousands and thousands of these programs sitting in the repository. So figuring out what programs you want to install, that can be a bit of a tricky part. But basically, you know, you go out, you do a Google search, you do your research, you find out what it is you want to install, and then you just plug that in after the install command. Like I say, you can do Apache 2, PHP, MySQL, a whole bunch of stuff. Now, once you've got the software installed, you know, as I said before, you know, everybody likes to laugh at Windows because they always have these updates. You know, every week, every Tuesday, you get another 10 updates, and everybody laughs at Microsoft and they say that's proof that Microsoft is crap. Well, the reality is every single operating system and every piece of software needs to get updated every once in a while. Same is true with Linux. So once you install all the software that you want on your Linux server, you know, you install the file server, you install the Samba server, you install Apache, whatever it is. If you want to update that software, all you do is you do the upgrade command. So you do sudo super user do apt-get upgrade. What this command will do is it'll go out to that repository, it'll see if software in the repository is newer than software that you have on the server, it'll bring down that information and then it'll say, do you want to update your software? You say yes, and then it will automatically just update all of the software that you have on your computer. So this is basically all you have to understand at this point for installing and maintaining your software. Sudo apt-get install whatever it is, installs it, sudo apt-get remove, no, not uninstall, not any of that stuff, remove whatever the name is, uninstalls it, and then like I say, to update everything, you do sudo apt-get upgrade. That will upgrade for you. So here we are back at the terminal screen on the server. So we're going to install Apache 2 since that's what we keep talking about. So the command for this then is sudo sudo superuser apt-get apt-get and then install, because that's what we're doing, and we're installing a piece of software, install, and then we're going to install Apache 2, so it's APACHE2. Now this entire process is very simple as long as you know what program you're trying to install. In order to know what program you're trying to install, you may have to do a Google search and do some research to figure out what it is that you're installing. Are you installing Apache? Are you installing Apache 2? Light HTTPD is a different type of web server. You have to go out and you have to do a Google search to figure out what software you're going to be installing, and that's what you plug in after the install command, and then all you do is you hit enter. So see, it is now reading the package list and it installed Apache 2. So it is literally that simple. So we now actually have a web server. Woohoo! It's that simple. Now, since we have this web server, since we have some software installed, we want to make sure that the software is up to date. You know, make sure there's no patches out there for the software. So for that command, as I talked about, it is sudo sudo apt-get apt-get and then upgrade. This will go out and see if there are any updates for the software that is installed on the system. Then you just hit enter, and now it's reading the packages, and so now it says no, you know, you have the latest and greatest software that you need. If there were updates out there, it would ask me, do you want to update the updates? And of course you would say yes. Now, you know, we have the server. We've played around with Apache 2. We decide we don't like Apache 2. We want to use some other web server. So we need to uninstall Apache 2. And again, as I've said, it's pretty simple. So all you do is sudo apt-get remove, R-E-M-O-V-E, Apache 2, A-P-A-C-H-E-2. So by using the remove command, this will now uninstall Apache 2, and then we hit the enter key. It goes through, it gives you some information. Do you really want to do this? You say yes, and hit enter again, and now Apache 2 is gone. So that is how easy it is to install, update, and uninstall a piece of software on a Linux computer. So with that, let's go back out to the outside world, and we're going to talk about restarting services. So now you understand how to install, remove, and then update the software onto your server. Now, like I say, Linux is best for servers. So I'm expecting that you're going to be using this for web servers or print servers or virtualization servers, etc. One of the important things is remember that once you turn one of these servers on, they can just go and go and go and go and go and go until the hardware burns out. Literally, once you turn a Linux system on, there are very few times you actually need to reboot the thing. And I mean, when I say very few times, I'm talking once a year might be overkill. But you know, when you go in and you change configuration files in the software that you have running on your server, you may need to restart that individual software or that individual service. So let's say if you have a web server, so you have Apache 2 installed onto your Linux server. You change some of the configuration files, those configuration files don't get loaded until you restart the Apache 2 service. Same may be true of PHP, same is true of virtualization servers. So although the computer stays on all the time, so the Linux server almost never gets shut off, you do have to restart these services every once in a while just to make sure that they're up to date. You know, sometimes individual services crash. So in the Windows world, if a service crashes, most likely the entire server will crash. In the Linux world, a single service can crash and you just restart the one service and it doesn't really affect anything else. So what I'm going to show you now is how to start, stop, and restart services. So we talked about before, you know, Apache 2. So this is a web server. You know, if you're new to Linux, probably web servers are going to be the first things that you're going to be playing around with. So we'll just go with using Apache 2 as the example for a while. Now, with this, what you need to do is you need to type in the command sudo, remember, super user do. This basically means root do. You then have a space /etc /init period d / whatever the service is that you plan to be restarting. So it's Apache 2, and then you do space, and then all you do after the space is you say start, stop, or restart. So let's say you change your configuration files in the Apache 2. You would do sudo space /etc /init period d /Apache 2, and then you would do restart. And that would restart the Apache 2 service, which would bring online whatever configuration changes that you made. Now let's say you're playing with the web server, you're making some changes, and you don't want any people from the outside world coming in while you do the changes. So you want to stop the services entirely, which basically turns the web server or makes the web server go offline. All you would do is sudo space /etc /init period d /Apache 2 stop. That stops the web service, but it doesn't stop anything else. So basically it means nobody can get to the website you're hosting, but you can still go in and you can change configuration files, you can edit things, you can modify things, you can do everything else on the server except the actual web server component is not functioning at this point. So this is restarting services. I say sudo /etc /initd / whatever the service name is, xxx. So that's all you have to do to start, stop, or restart services. Let's go onto the computer and I'll show you how this works. So we're back at the terminal screen. I have reinstalled the Apache 2 web server. So we have a service to start, stop, and restart. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to stop the service because the service is already running. It's already, you know, it's an automatic service. So we type in sudo super user do, sudo, space /etc /init period d /Apache 2 space, and then we'll do stop. So we will stop the service. We hit enter, and it is now stopping the service. So now the web server is offline. So if this was, let's say this was everymanit.com, and I ran this command on the server, everymanit.com would just stop working. Nobody could get to the website anymore. So if we want to start the service again we do sudo sudo space /etc /init period d /Apache 2 APACHE2, and then we do start start, and it hit enter, and it now started the web service. So with everymanit.com, if you ran the stop command, it would stop the service. If you ran the start command, it would restart the service. And then finally restart, you know, really simple, sudo sudo space /etc /init period d /Apache 2, and then restart, R-E-S-T-A-R-T. So, you know, especially with web servers, you do the restart command. You know, you change an Apache configuration file or such, and you want to make sure that gets reloaded. You just do this Apache 2 restart command. And again, what is really incredibly nice, and you'll see this when we run this command with the Linux world, is you don't have to restart the entire server. You know, if you restart an entire server, no matter how fast the operating system is, it's going to take a couple minutes before everything's online. If you only have to restart the service, everything will be back online in seconds. So you know, if you want to set your little timer right now, I'm going to hit enter, and you'll see how fast it takes just to simply restart this web server. So I hit enter now, and there you go. The entire web server was stopped and restarted in what, 2 seconds? So think about that. You know, if you're using Windows and you have to restart your web server, you know, that's going to take forever. It's going to take, you know, your server is going to be offline anywhere between 4 to 10 minutes. With this, it meant the website was offline for a second, for 2 seconds. So that's all there is to starting, stopping, and restarting services. You know, as with all this stuff, it seems pretty easy. So let's go back out to the real world, and we'll talk about the next command. Okay, so now I've shown you how to restart services. Again, pretty simple. Like I say, Linux is relatively simple as long as you understand, you know, what to put in. The reason everybody thinks that Linux is so bloody complicated is because they have no idea what commands to enter, and therefore they think it's really complicated. Most of this stuff, basic Linux administration, is really, like I say, it's really pretty simple. So the next thing we need to talk about is the command called top. T-O-P. If you're coming from the Windows world, think of the top command as basically your task manager. So at the little command prompt, you type in top, and what happens is you will see how much of your memory is being used, how much of your CPU is being used, and then all of the processes that are happening. So you'll see, you know, however many processes, you'll see something called the processor ID, or the PID. PID. Like I said, you'll see the CPU usage per process, the memory usage per process, how long the process has been running, etc. So basically the top command is the task manager of the Linux world. Now in task manager, you know, if a process is just going off and doing its own thing and you need to kill it, you can just right click and do end process. In top, all you do is you do the command K, and then the process ID number. So if you see process 1578 is just doing something stupid, you type in K 1578, and that will kill that particular process. So everything, all the processes get their own unique process ID number. And so if you, like I say, if one is just doing something it's not supposed to be doing, you use the command K and then whatever the process ID is within the program top. So I'll show you this in a second. Basically, you do the top command that brings up this this little task manager type thing, and then within there you can modify some things, and then if you need to kill a certain process, you can just do K space whatever the process ID number is, and that will kill the process. If the process is something important for the Linux server, it will tell you that the process cannot be killed, you know, if it's something to do with the kernel or something, you know, that you don't have administrative rights for. If that's the case, then you may have to do your once a year reboot in order to kill the process. So let's go over to the computer, and then I'll just show you how the top command works. Again, it's pretty simple, just the task manager of the Linux world. So we're back at the terminal screen. So we'll do sudo, S-U-D-O, and then top, T-O-P. And now this gives you, as I said before, this is basically like a task manager for Linux. So if you look, you can see what the uptime for the computer is. You can see the total number of tasks. You can see the CPU usage is not very much. You can see the memory usage, you know, how much is used, how much is free, buffers, swap files, etc. So, I mean, this basically gives you the same information the Task Manager would in the Windows world. You can see that right now, up at the top, there's process ID 1489. The user is root. There gives a couple of things, you know, CPU usage and memory usage, the time that the process has been up, and that's top. That's the top command. So, you know, the process has been up for a little bit now. So this is pretty simple. Now, if you need to understand how to use the top command better, you can use you can type in H. And if you type in H, this will now show you all the different commands that you can use. So, you know, ZBs, LTMs, 1L, FO, all that stuff. So these are all the different help things that you can use within the top environment. So if we go back, we hit enter. So let's say we want to kill a process. What we'll do, just to make this easy and just to close out this little segment, is we'll kill this top process. So this top is a task manager. As you can see, the process ID is right there at the top. It is 1489. So we will type in K. It says PID to kill, and we will say 1489, which equates to top, and then we hit enter, and then we hit enter again, and it is now dead. So that's all you do. K, kill, you put in the process ID, you hit enter twice, and now the process is gone. It is literally that simple. So top is simply the task manager of the Linux world. If you need to figure out, you know, what commands to use, if you type in H, that will put you onto the little help screen. So with that, let's go back out to the real world. So I showed you how to use top. You know, that's pretty simple. You know, task manager, just in a less graphical way, I suppose. So now we need to talk about basic folder navigation in the Linux world. This is slightly different than Windows, but the funny thing is it looks close enough to Windows that when things don't work right, you know, people have a nasty tendency of wanting to pick up their computer and throw it out the window. So here's the biggest thing in the Linux world. You know, you have CD. This is just like in DOS or in Windows. CD means change directory. So if you want to go to a different directory, you type in CD. Now, if you are in a folder, so you are in a folder already, and you want to go to a lower level folder. So you're in this folder and you want to go to the folder etc, right? You would do CD space, so nothing, etc. And that will drop you into the folder that you're trying to go into. So change directory space etc. So you're in this folder, and that will drop you into this folder right here. Here's the problem. Let's say you are here, and there is a folder called ABC, right? And this is in a folder, and this is in another folder. So all the way up here is root, right? This is root. The biggest folder here is root. So you have root, and then you have a folder under root, then you have a folder under root. This is where you're at right now, and then you have a folder under that. So you're right here, right? You're right here, and you're trying to go to ABC. If you type in CD, ABC, you will change directory into this directory, this folder called ABC, and everything will work fine. Here's the problem. People in the Windows world are used to doing CD \ABC to get into this ABC directory. So you're in this folder and you're trying to get into the ABC directory. The problem is in the Linux world, what Linux does is it goes, okay, you want to be in root, you want to change to root folder, and then you want a folder ABC in root. So see what happens, like I say, in Linux, is it goes, okay, you want to be in root, ABC, and then it goes to root, and it can't find ABC. So that's where you have to be very careful. So if you get what I'm saying, it gets a little confusing. But the main thing is, like I say, is if you're in a folder and you're trying to go to a folder one level down, you do CD space A, B, C, and that'll work for you. This is one reason why a lot of people, a lot of Linux administrators, always type in just the full path to wherever they're trying to go, no matter where they're at. So, you know, if I'm trying to go in and change something on the web server, I would just do cd/etc/var/www, and that would drop me into the www web server. But the main thing is, Linux is very finicky about this whole change directory thing. If you put a slash here, if you put a /, it's going to think that this folder is in the root directory. So if you're in a directory and you're trying to go to a directory one lower, all you do is you just type the command, you know, cd space abc, and you'll be fine. The next thing is, again, remember, capitalization matters. So if you say cd and then you do A, B, C, all uppercase, it's going to look, and this is all lowercase, so it's going to say directory not found, because, again, capitalization is important in the Linux world. An uppercase letter is different than a lowercase letter. So it's going to look for the directory uppercase ABC. If the directory that actually exists is lowercase ABC, it will come back and say directory not found. Again, all of this is pretty simple stuff, but maybe we should go on the computer and I'll just show you this real quick. So let's go over to the computer and I'll just show you this basic navigation. It's important to understand. Like I said, it can be frustrating as hell if you don't grasp it. So we're back at the terminal screen. So the first thing we're going to do, you know, just to show you this demonstration, we're going to make sure we're in the root directory. So we'll type cd. Oops. We will type cd, as in change directory, space /. This will put us back into root. And so now we are in the root directory. So if we do the list command, this lists all the files and folders in the directory. We will see that there's bin and dev and etc and lost and found and medium. So let's look down and we see that etc folder. We see etc. So we want to go into the etc folder. All you do is you do cd space etc, and this is going to drop us into the etc folder. So now if you look right beside the little blinking cursor, it'll say we're at /etc. If I do the list command again, ls, this shows all the files and folders. So obviously we are in a different folder than we were before. So in order to go back to root, we'll do cd space /, and this will take us back to root. If we look at the directory listing at root again, ls, you know, we'll see this nice small thing. Now here's where I talked before about capitalization being important. So let's say we want to go into etc, and I showed you that etc is real, and I showed you that etc exists. So if I do cd and now I do all uppercase etc. So it's the same letters, only uppercase letters, and then I hit enter. See, no such file or directory exists. Why? Because again, Linux cares about the capitalization. Uppercase letters are different than lowercase letters. That's very important. So that's really all there is for directory navigation. Just be careful with the whole backsplash thing. Remember, when you want to go to a new directory or to a directory that's below you, you do cd space and then etc, or whatever the directory is. Do not put that backslash or that / in front of it. Just put the directory, and that's what will move you around, and that's pretty simple. So let's go back out to the real world. So that was a class on basic Linux tasks. So these are the basic tasks that you're going to need to understand in order to get anywhere in the Linux world. So, you know, in the future classes, we're going to delve deeper and deeper and deeper into the Linux world. But if you don't understand these tasks, well, you can't go any further. We talked about sudo, super user do. Basically, this means run as administrator if you're used to the Windows world. Pretty simple idea. We talked about man pages. These are the manual pages about different programs that you're going to be running, you know, ping, or the man page itself, or apt-get, etc. If you need to understand how the program works, or you know what arguments you need to put in, you can just do man and then say whatever the program is, and it should be able to give you something that'll be useful for you. We talked about task cell or task select. Again, this, you just type in task cell and it will give you a list of all the different functions you may want your server to do. So if you want your server to be a web server or an email server or a file server or a Samba server or Java Tomcat server, whatever, you can just highlight and check that off, and then when you hit enter, it will automatically install that software for you. So you don't have to do a whole hell of a lot. Like I say, this can be very, very good, especially in the test environment or the non-production environment. Because, I mean, you can get, like I say, a web server up and running in less than 30 minutes, maybe 20 if your hardware is pretty good. We talked about the apt-get command. So we talked about where, since most open source software is free, or you're going to be paying for it in roundabout ways, they put all the software up in these repositories on the internet. You use the apt-get command to go up to those repositories and pull it down to your computer. So if you do apt-get install, whatever program it is, it will install the program. apt-get remove uninstalls the program, and apt-get upgrade updates all the software that you have on your computer. Again, pretty simple. We talked about restarting services. So the main thing, like I say, in the Linux world, the operating system itself very, 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 very rarely has to get rebooted. But sometimes, you know, you go in and you change configuration files for particular services for servers on the server, and you may have to restart those services. Again, all you do is you do sudo space /etc/initd/initd/ whatever it is, and then you can do start, stop, or restart. That is how you start, stop, or restart services in the Linux world. Pretty easy, pretty simple. We talked about top, which is basically the task manager of the Linux world. You type in top, you get to see, you know, how much of your CPU is being used, how much of your memory is being used, what processes are running, how much of the CPU or memory they're using, etc. Within the top, you can type in K and then the process ID number, and that can kill the process, as long as it's not a core process that you don't have rights to kill. That may be a problem, but all you do, like I say, is if you have some runaway program, you can do K and then whatever the process ID is, and it will kill that process. Finally, we talked about navigation, and I just showed you. Again, Linux can be finicky. If you're trying to go to a directory that is inside the directory you're already in, you do CD space nothing and then that directory. You don't do the /. If you put in the /, then Linux thinks that that directory is up in the root directory, and it all just gets confused and it goes bad. I also showed you about capitalization. If you try to go to CD lowercase ABC and you type in CD uppercase ABC, those are different folders as far as Linux is concerned. Uppercase and lowercase, again, matters in the Linux world. That's why when you go navigating through the Linux operating system and you see all the files and folders, almost, probably, every single one is all lowercase. The reason is because they don't want to confuse people with different capitalizations. So, you know, almost all folders and files are always named lowercase, just not to make anybody confused. And that's not a bad thing for you to do. You know, just naming files completely lowercase isn't a bad deal. As I said before, I think all of this stuff is pretty simple, and this gives you the foundation for the things that we're going to go into next. You know, security settings, networking, the whole 9 yards. Again, Linux is pretty simple. You just have to understand these commands. If you understand these commands, it'll all work for you. And again, as I said before, we're showing you all this in the server, so on the server operating system. But again, all these commands can be run from the desktop version of Ubuntu Linux simply by going, to applications, accessories, and the terminal. You open up the terminal prompt and you can run all of these commands straight from that terminal prompt, and you'll basically get the exact same results. So that's it. As you know, I'm Eli the Computer Guy here for Everyman IT. This was Basic Linux Tasks. I enjoyed teaching this class and look forward to seeing you at the next one.